no, I'm here. I'm not just a voice in your head.
Yeah, okay.
All right, well, we'll start then. I'm very happy to be chatting today with Mike Boxhall, who is author of The Empty Chair, The Teaching, Not the T-Shirt. He's founder of the Empty Chair Foundation. He's a meditation teacher, and he's a craniosacral therapist, trainer. And he's a lot of other things, but they're kind of the main things. I'm sure he'll tell us all. So hello, Mike, again.
Hi, John. It's very nice to be in touch with you.
Yeah, you too. It's nice. As I was saying to somebody else, these podcasts are a very nice excuse to actually get in touch with people who you sort of have a kind of long distance nodding kind of acquaintance. They're like our neighbour. I live in the country like yourself. I don't know if it's the same with you, but our neighbours, we just sort of wave at them. Very rarely have long conversations with them, but you have a kind of waving relationship. And it's the same with lots of people who are involved in similar kind of things, like yourself. Like I've known you for, I was thinking about it the other day, it's about 20 years.
Yeah, it's a diminishing return. I think you talk about 20 years. 20 years is becoming quite a long time in my life nowadays. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, when you get to 85, you wonder how many more 20 years you've got, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you actually brought your age up. I was going to ask you about it, so let's dive in there. So you're 85 now, are you?
That's right. Yeah.
And what do you attribute to your longevity? Because you used to smoke, and I don't know if you still drink. What's the secret, Mike?
Okay, I don't know whether those were questions, but my doctor told me, whatever you do about drinking, he said, keep it regular. He said it's good for your heart, but don't go from binging to nothing. So I have a glass of wine every night, and that suits me very well.
Great.
And then every time I have a glass of wine, I think, okay, Mike, you're just following doctor's orders. You're doing a great job here.
Right. And do you have special diet, or do you exercise, or what do you put it down to? Because not everybody lives to 85. A lot of people don't.
Okay. No, I mean, to answer your question more seriously, the one you started with, what you put it down to. And I tell you, quite honestly, I put it down to my students and the work and the relationship, and that actually keeps me in the present. And if you can manage to be in the present occasionally, your degenerative mechanisms work a lot slower, and your recovery mechanisms work a lot faster. This is actually science. If you look at some of the modern sciences, like epigenetics, which is biology, basically, it all confirms that. It's relationship that keeps us going, relationship.
And do you think that being engaged, because the kind of cliched work model is, you work to 65, then you retire, and then, you sort of hang around waiting to die, as far as I can see it. That's what a lot of people do. And because they go from being engaged to having really nothing to get up for in the morning, people can decline a lot quicker. Do you think it's because you're engaged so much? Because you're really busy, like you're like the James Bond of like teachers. You're just back from where, Oklahoma? Is that
yes,
right?
I am. Yeah.
And if you look at your teaching schedule, you're all over the world.
Yeah, I'm going to Palma de Mallorca in 3 days' time. Yeah, that is true, and I thrive. I just literally love what I'm doing. And if you're in love with something, you last longer.
Right. And I know you've got an interest in the treatment of Alzheimer's and dementia generally. Does what you're saying correlate to what you're experiencing in treating people with Alzheimer's and dementia?
Absolutely. I think the thing with, let's look at dementia, for example, for a moment. Alzheimer, I think we're only talking about maybe the earlier stages, but certainly with dementia, if you start relating to people as people instead of talking over their heads about them, uh, they they respond. They may not be respond at a level which can be codified by your intellect. But if you work from the heart, they respond at a level which then you can meet them, and they do respond to that. You see, I think that the two great things that any human being needs, and there's enough scientific proof of this, the two great things a human being needs are to be held and to be heard. I could talk for a long time about what I mean by being heard, and that is really the essence of probably my courses. But to be held and to be heard, and we don't get enough of those. I mean, our society is frightened of touch, by and large, and we don't know how to listen. We analyze, we categorize, we judge, we do all those things, and we've got a ready answer about what the person should be doing. But probably at no time have we ever heard them. We've heard about their symptomatology, that's all.
So what does when you're working with someone with dementia or Alzheimer's, what does it look like?
Well, let me start really at the beginning almost. I don't work with Alzheimer's and I don't work with dementia. I work with people. And I really do look for the health in a person. They may have all sorts of frightening labels attached to them, but they're labels. That's not who they are. So just receive them. It's interesting, and I got this from I suppose I got this from an Eastern. Like if you take Chinese calligraphy, there's only one writing in Chinese. There may be 200 and something languages, but there's one writing which they all have in common. So you take the word for listen. It has 5 mini pictograms, which make up one bigger pictogram. And the 5 pictograms that make up to listen are ears, obviously, eyes. Second, we do a lot of, quote, listening, unquote, with our eyes. You, in other words, I'm focused on you, not what I'm going to say to you when you stop talking, then I'll give you my wisdom. I'm focused on you. Full attention. And then the 5th one, which brings it into beauty as far as I'm concerned, from the heart. Not from the brain, from the heart. So that is an interpretation of what listening means, which I try and get across to people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's lovely. When you're working with people who have these kind of conditions, are you touching them? Are you holding them physically?
Yeah.
Or I know you're holding them with the space and the energy and all that, but are you physically hands-on as well, or?
Yes, I do. I mean, recently I was in a hospital in Montevideo, Uruguay, and there was a man in there in this. He was in the terminal ward. It was a cancer hospital. He was in the terminal ward, the place where they put him to die, And he was the father-in-law of a good friend of mine and his wife. So he was the father of the wife and the father-in-law of the husband, who was a great friend of mine. And he asked me if I would just go and see him. And I usually rebel against that because it puts me under so much pressure that I've got to go and do something and get a result. So I usually say no. But anyway, I just agreed to this because I was so fond of this couple. So I went in there, and he apparently couldn't move. His mouth was hanging open, saliva coming out of one corner of it. His eyes were more or less fixed, and he was moved. Not, what did I say? Not moving. So I said to him when I was standing beside him, "Hello," I said, "I'm Mike. I'm a friend of your son-in-law's, and so may I put my hands on you?" And you would hardly notice it, but his head fractionally moved up and down very slowly at about the speed of a tortoise. And I took that for a yes, and I just put my hands on him for a while and just sat there, listening in the way that I've tried to describe just earlier. And I listened some more. And he seemed to be shifting about a bit. And a nurse came in and said, over his head, to the son-in-law, "He's vegetative, you know. We've decided it would be best for him if we withdraw all the life support system tomorrow and just let him quietly go."
Jesus.
So I said, but he's moving. He's moving because he's got bed sores and it hurts. So he's moving. He's adjusting himself slowly. And so I went on like that for a bit. And he said, "Okay, well, we'll leave it for a few days." So came the end of the session after about half an hour. I gradually took my hands off. I said goodbye to him. I said, "I'm going now." So I went off, and a couple of days later I came back to England. In the meantime, he started moving more. He started talking more. And he became a real nuisance in this ward because he started getting like a rather bad-tempered old man, which he had been before he fell so sick. So they moved him into a regular ward, and they did take his tubes out because he didn't need the tubes. And he just got really uppity. He actually went back into his previous persona extremely well. 15 days later, I had a lovely email from the son and the daughter-in-law saying he passed away quietly yesterday, normally, in peace. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I mean, that's not doing anything. I don't do anything. I listen. I try to get my intellect, if I can, out of the way as much as possible. And I fall into something that I call trust. Trust there is an intelligence, and that anything my intellect can come up with, I don't want to throw away the intellect. No, we've got to have it. I'm not saying anything stupid like that. But if the intellect has got us to where we are, but if from time to time we can just let it out of the way a little bit, that intelligence, which knows what it's doing, right down to the minutest subatomic level and beyond, let it do what it needs to do, then things can happen.
So have you got to the stage now where you don't try and figure it out after the fact? Like, do you just go, "That's brilliant, now he's improved and then he's passed away peacefully, that's great," and you forget about it? Or do you kind of go, "Well, I wonder what was really going on there?" Or do you just, the communication that occurred between the two of you, is it all settled inside you, or do you wonder about it?
I guess that's part of it. Part of me quite often wonders about the meaning of things and the meaning of life and all that kind of thing, but that's not what I'm working with. What I'm trying to do, John, the big thing that I'm trying to do, and the big thing I'm trying to get across to people who are practitioners of anything, whether it's craniosacral or whether it's osteopathy or whether it's medicine or even whether it's law or religion.
Great. This is it. This is the big one now. Okay, go on. I'm ready.
Whatever it may be, is that the function of the limited, of the intellect, is to define and limit. That is its function. That intelligence takes, sure, but the more we can get out of the way in a joint practice to someone, with someone else, or with some other people, the more we can get into a joint practice with them, at some level where the intellect is not interfering, the closer we get to the common source rather than the separation, which is the intellect.
Right.
I never know whether I'm making any sense or not, but there we are. That's the problem. I'm not trying to make sense. I'm trusting the senses.
Right. Say in a normal kind of practice kind of setting, somebody comes in, I've got a back pain, can you help me with my back pain?
Oh, yeah, okay.
And
well, then I'm...
off you go.
Okay. So, if that happens, if I have a skill, like the example I often give is if, for example, I dislocate my little finger doing something stupid, walking around, I dislocate my little finger. That's not what we're talking about. If I know anybody who is either a chiropractor or an osteopath or something like that, I'll go to them. I'll look the other way and I'll say, "Can you fix my little finger?" And they will probably get hold of it and give it a sharp tug and push it back again. And I will probably say, "Ow," and it's fixed. But I'm not, that's not quite what I'm talking about, because I touched on earlier this. I don't mind what profession people have. I cannot and don't want to teach them how to do their profession. I don't teach craniosacral work. It's not in any way that a lot of people would recognize it. What I am interested in is that listening thing, working with people so that whatever they do, it's the level they come from when they do it, not what they do, which is what I'm concerned about. Where in themselves do they come from? If they come from an analytic level of symptomatology, pathology, diagnosis, prognosis, and cure, then they are at a certain extremely highly valued level. If we want to go beyond that level, we have to let go of the workings of the intellect. The spirit is not subject to the intellect. You're not going to find the level of the spirit by trying harder. You're going to find the level of the spirit rather by surrendering some of what keeps you from it. And what keeps you from it is the machinations, the separations caused by the intellect and the personal self, the me.
Right.
So the work is about what do we have in common, not what separates us. And all beings, all human beings anyway, at some level of the psyche, have a level where pathology has not taken form. So I invented a little expression once. How did it go? Craniosacral therapy at its tenderest is a journey taken by two or more people to a level of being where there is no pathology, where it hasn't taken
That's very
form.
nice. That's very nice.
So, I mean, let's not get confused with reincarnation, which is a whole lot of other subject which I don't want to talk about. It doesn't interest me particularly. But we can talk about rebirth in the psyche taking place in the moment. The moment.
Right. Now you're not talking about rebirthing. You're talking about a different thing there, aren't you?
I'm talking about rebirth, but not to be confused with reincarnation.
Or rebirthing, you know, the heavy breathing and all that sort of stuff.
Oh no! I'm not talking about any techniques at all.
Yeah, good.
Okay, I mean, let me take another tangent, if I may, John, for a moment. If you look at the thing embryologically, what have you got? The first thing you have in the single cell is sensation. Every cell is sensate. You've got 50 trillion cells in the body. Everyone is sensate. You put one in the petri dish and drop acid on it, it shrivels. It has sensation. So the first experience we have of ourselves, the beginnings are actually sensation. Then a bit later on comes along feeling. Feelings and emotions, that kind of feeling is what I mean there. A bit later on, substantially later, comes thinking. And that grows into the concept of separation, me, you, mummy, daddy, pussycats, whatever. That's the thinking, the conceptualization. And then I put the highest level is possibly intuition, and I don't think we all develop intuition because I don't think we trust it. I think we call it chance or luck or something. But anyway, we start with sensation. So that is the one thing that all sentient life has in common. That is complete innocence, of course. There is no conceptualization going on. So I suppose in a way, the level at which I'm trying to join people is at a sensory level and then include the feelings, but not the level of thinking of what happens if and what is that and what does this mean and what does that mean. I may never know what it means. If I do a job of work with somebody, I'm not doing something to them. I'm doing my best to set conditions in which they can have sufficient safety in their surroundings to have the courage to explore themselves at a deeper level. So that's how we work, really. I am not doing something to my clients or my students or whatever it may be.
It's funny, you've said that a few times now, and it reminds me of the first time I met you. I did a course with you in Dublin. I don't know if you remember, but I was because I knew we were going to have this chat. I was kind of thinking back on different things, and I think it was a day seminar, maybe, or maybe it was a half a day. But a couple of the things that you said in that have stayed with me all the way through, and that's one of them. That thing of, you know, I think you said something like, it's awful when you lie down and someone comes at you like they're going to do something to you. Uh,
Yeah.
it makes you feel very tense if you're lying there and someone is going, right now I'm going to do something. And in kind of preparing for our chat, I was kind of looking at different craniosacral people on YouTube, and there's a lot of people who still kind of do craniosacral from that very mechanical kind of approach. Of I am now going to release this thing or that thing, and
Yeah.
do you think that this whole biodynamic craniosacral movement that's kind of has kind of sprung up in reaction to that very mechanistic approach, because pretty much the craniosacral world is split down the middle between biodynamic and upledger, as far as I can see, or that very osteopathic approach.
Yeah, I mean, okay, you've raised two things, if I can hold them in mind here. To begin with, I'm very wary of picking up on identifying whose approach this is and whose approach that is and that kind of thing, because I do think every teaching has a value at the level of that teaching and should be honored for that. And it's this teaching may lead somebody to another teaching and so on. But I will just say this, that every teaching goes to a certain level, and there is always a deeper level. I was teaching a bunch of extremely senior osteopaths recently. There was a class of 45 osteopaths. They were very senior, and some of them had worked directly with Viola Freeman, who was a direct student, I think, of the man himself, the founder of osteopathy. And in other words, they knew what they were talking about. And they so loved the work, the senior ones, the very senior ones, the ones that had a lot of background. They so loved the work that they said, this is another level that we must take osteopathy to. I'm deliberately not
work,
identifying...
You mean your work?
Yeah. Well, I mean, at my work, their work, they found a different level. They found I've had the same thing from psychotherapists. I've actually had some lawyers and priests fall in love with this work. I can't teach them how to be priests, and I certainly can't teach them how to be lawyers. But there is a
give it a go with the priests, Mike. I think you could give it a go. You could have tried.
Well, there are many kinds of priests. I just lost my plot there somewhere. I just read there's something I wanted to say. So yeah,
you were saying that the lawyers and the priests loved it as much as
all right. Well, I can come back to that. I can come back to that if you ask me a question in a moment. But I think what I wanted to say was that this thing about the biodynamic and everything. All that is fine, but I studied that for a long time. I was there when we first started using the word biodynamic. I was kind of part of it because I'd been on the English board and I was on the American board at the time. And I looked at the words biodynamic, and what does bio mean? Roughly, life. What does dynamic mean? It's roughly something about movement. And biodynamic is exactly what the universe does. It is movement that comes life. And so people got heard of the word biodynamic, and it somehow ceased to be life causing the movement. life itself causing the movement. In other words, energy coming into form. It started being something that you could use as a tool. I mean, how can biodynamic be something you use as a tool? That's my argument. It's not a thing. It's not an object. It is this universe taking form, essence taking form. So, supposing we trusted that for a change. So, I mean, that's my take on the word biodynamic. Yes, it is useful. It has taken thousands of people to a different level of work, and if that's what it is called, so be it. That's fine. I still say there is another level for all of us, and that is our path. That is the human endeavor to find that deeper level where we use the frontal brain not to detach ourselves from the source, but in order to get back towards the source consciously instead of naively, which is how we came into the world. Human being came into the world naively, if you want to put it that way. We developed a frontal brain. Perhaps we can cease to be useful when we can go out of it consciously, elevate consciousness into some other form.
So what you're describing is I would consider it as a very kind of deep level of work and treatment. How does that relate to somebody who's got no interest in alternative medicine, someone who's has a child who has been given like a couple of labels, autistic spectrum or something like that, and they've gone down the sort of route that they've been conditioned to go down. They tried the doctors, they tried the sort of more orthodox approach, and it hasn't really worked. And they just that intuition that you were talking about is saying to them, what I've been told isn't. I don't believe it, and I'm going to keep trying to do something to help my child. And they go into the sort of, they start looking on the internet and they're looking for answers. How does what you're talking about relate back to them, or how do you talk to somebody like that and explain in sort of those kind of terms that they might be able to understand?
Okay. To begin with, they might not come to me at all, John. They might well go to somebody who is offering to ameliorate the child's problem. Can I answer this question by saying for 10 years, before I gave up practice, I don't practice anymore. Well, very rarely. I don't have a regular practice. For 10 years, my practice was infertility in women. And apparently it was a certain amount of success with that because I got to treat a lot of babies. And a lot of the stuff that I come out with nowadays, I've actually learned from babies, because babies are sensate, but they don't have great big intellects getting in the way. Most of the people that would come to me in those 10 years would have been to doctors. They would have probably had IVF. They would have done just about everything. But everything had been tested, both in the man and the woman. And they still weren't conceiving, so what was wrong? And what I worked out was the only thing wrong was the body was not at peace, not at rest, not in its full functioning of how it meant to be. In other words, stress. And stress is something that we can work with. if we work with the stress level and don't work with the objects of the stress. Don't stick a label on it, just work with the stress level of the whole system. Again, I've got very attracted to...
What do you mean by the objects of the stress?
Well, whatever has come out as a symptomatology, like those conditions that you mentioned, are the...
Right.
Do you see what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
If you look at, very modern neurobiology, 90% of all illness has a root cause in stress. I didn't invent that figure.
90%. It's amazing, isn't it?
It's a startling statement. Layer upon layer upon layer of undigested stress. I introduce people to the body by talking about the intelligence of the body. The body ingests. It ingests everything: thoughts, music, the beautiful countryside, the sun, the rain, the disasters that happen, the car's broken down, the child's got whooping cough. We ingest carrots and potatoes, and if you're not a vegetarian, some extremely good beef in Uruguay. I recommend it. We ingest, and then we digest. And so one of the part of the digestion is that all those things that we have digested, some of them are things, some are feelings, some are thoughts, get distributed around the system by the liver to where they're most useful. And so everything that happens to us, everything we think, hear, feel, sense, actually becomes in this process who we are. Literally, who we are. And then we eliminate what is not useful. We eliminate what's not useful and let it go. But sometimes, for various reasons, we're not able to eliminate what is useful. That's where the stress comes in. And it mutates, as it were. One stress is followed by another stress, is followed by another stress through the lives, and they constellate, and then they become something you can put a label on and call it a disease. I am not an academic. I have no intellectual training. So when I talk about things that happen, I've investigated. I've got them from other people, but they do tie in with what I feel happening and what I sense happening. I cannot prove them. That's the job of science. But it is very comforting to my ego when I find that a way I've been working through my, if you want to put it, metaphysical voyages get confirmed by science. That makes me feel good. I'm catching myself going into a field that, whilst I feel it, I cannot articulate it well, because that's why I've been describing I'm not an intellectual or a scientist. So there we come to the intuition level and the feeling level, which I have. The sensation level and the intellectual level are much less in me. So I very often have great difficulty in
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah, in putting things into words.
Yeah. There isn't enough time. Like, you couldn't become...
Yes, go on, John.
What I was going to say is you couldn't become a scientist. Like, there isn't... Because, I've found you get into conversations with people and they sort of adopt a kind of "well, prove it" mentality, you know. And like you'd go mad trying to. You couldn't get qualified enough in every little field of neuroscience and quantum physics and whatever to have arguments for everything that you feel, particularly everything that you experience in doing this kind of work.
Well, that's right.
So, like, for myself, like, I totally get what you're saying. You just have to kind of go, well, look, this is just what I do. This is my experience. People say they, like, I used to have this thing about my success rate. And it's like, well, how do you quantify your success rate? And I bet, well, I look back through my case histories and, I kind of go, well, that person got what they came in for. That person got what they came in for. It's very unscientific, but you kind of, it's just like, well, that they're all happy now with what they came for. And so that's what counts.
And very often, in addition to that, I think you could say that person got what it turned out that they wanted, but they didn't know they wanted it when they first came in. So, in other words, somebody comes in with a frozen shoulder and they want that fixed, of course. But you get a sense that there's something else there. The frozen shoulder is just the tip of the iceberg, as it were. So something makes them stay around for a while. And after a while, somehow the exchanges that take place have gone to a different level. Now, nobody's forcing that person to come. They, in fact, in many cases, it's almost like they won't go away. But the work has obviously gone to a different level. So, supposing they're still around after half a dozen treatments, 4 or 5 treatments, and you look back at your notes and you say, how's the whatever it was they came in with? And they say, oh, that went a long time ago. I'd forgotten about that, because they're working at another level.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure we all get that. And you just have to be awake the whole time to what is going on. I mean, this is a side issue, but one of the things that appalls me sometimes is when I find people knowing what treatment they're going to do next time. That may be useful in mechanical work, but it is a sign of mechanical work, because at anything like the level of work I'm talking about, how can you possibly know what's going to happen next time? Because it's going to be a different person that comes in to see you next time.
And a whole period of time will have passed. Completely, lots of things will have changed.
Well, and of course, everything in the universe is changing all the time, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, I get excited by these things, by these ideas.
Well, that's one thing I was going to ask you. Are you optimistic about the future? Like, do you like the way things are going in the world?
Oh, yeah. I truly am optimistic about the future. Let's look at that symbol that everybody's familiar with, that yin-yang symbol, the black and the white with the dot in there, and it looks like a couple of tadpoles curled up, you know what I'm...
Yeah.
Okay. The beginning of one is the end of another. That's the philosophy. I experienced that, and what I find is, because I travel around an awful lot, that wherever there is, everything seems to be going all wrong, everybody's killing everybody else, and disasters are happening. Within that, if you look for it, there is a health trying to emerge. It is there. But you've got to be pretty steady in yourself to be able to get a sense of that. And so I really believe that what is going on in the biggest sense at the moment in the world, geopolitically, is possibly the beginnings of a new, what do you want to call it, a new way of being. And I think that's going to be led by a restoration of balance. You know, the black and white yin and yang symbol we mentioned, the masculine and the feminine principles at work. What we suffer from, to my mind, enormously is the overweening domination of the masculine. What is masculine and what is feminine. I mean, trying to put things into a tiny nutshell like this, but thinking is said to be masculine. Feeling is said to be feminine. This is a model that was elaborated by Jung, the great psychologist Jung, Carl Gustav Jung, not all that many years ago. Thinking is masculine. Judgment, analysis, more, accumulation. That's exactly all the things that are happening at the moment are masculine. The word for intellect in Greek, nous, is a masculine word. So what is feminine? Conservation, nurturing, holding, receiving. We could go on, and I ask classes to go on, and they make big lists. And whichever way you look, virtually all of our leaders, whether they happen to be men or women, is not important. They are dominated by the masculine principle. Somehow we need a bit more balance. We need a place to come from as well as somewhere to go to. We need wisdom. Now, wisdom in the Greek language, which is where much of our philosophy comes from, much of it, is Sophia, which is a feminine word. Wisdom. Wisdom is feminine. Intellect is masculine. And where is Sophia? Where is wisdom located? In the heart. Now, science has almost caught up with that. In fact, I think it has caught up with that. Thinking, particularly since Descartes' time and others, was what we had to worship. Thinking, feeling went out the window. And that has been happening. That's 400 or 500 years, whatever it is, since Descartes. Exponentially increasing the dominance of the masculine. Now, if we were to artificially set down to cure that by injecting some feminine, I'm speaking metaphorically, inject some feminine, that again would be a masculine doing, rather than trying to hold. I said the human being needs to be heard and to be held. Both of those things are actually feminine. That's not what we're mostly doing. We're trying to fix, which is masculine. And because it is masculine and a work of the intellect, it is a limitation. It is limitating. The symbol for masculine could be something like a pyramid, which comes up to a point. Symbol of the feminine would be something like a circle. These are archetypal figures. The feminine that circle can expand without end. The pyramid can go upwards without end. But the thing that rests with me is however big the pyramid is, once you get to the top, there's only one place to go. And that's to fall off it.
Or down the other side.
Down the other side again. That's it. Down the other side.
Because of the length of this conversation with Mike, I've had to break it into two parts. So that's the end of part one, and part two will follow.
I've never felt this good in my entire life. Make me some spaghetti.